Hello, and welcome to another episode of Lore and Crime, a podcast where we dive into the shadowy depths of history, where true crime and chilling events inspire dark fictional tales that will keep you up at night. I'm your host Diego, and in this episode we're going to Sydney in 1935, a city grappling with the Great Depression, where crime festered in the shadows of glitzy dance halls and smoky pubs, where a strange discovery will unravel one of the most bizarre and chilling murder mysteries Australia has ever seen. We are going to follow Detective Frank Mathews as he's pulled into a web of gangsters and betrayal, in a case that is as unsettling as it is unsolved. While this episode is based in real events and follows known facts, it remains a dramatized portrayal, a theory of what might have truly happened. So settle in and enjoy the mystery that is the Shark Arm murder. The storm was raging like a mad beast outside the creaking confines of Pat Brady's seaside cottage. In the cramped, dim kitchen, lit only by a sputtering oil lamp, Brady leaned against the battered counter, the wind howling a constant dirge through the rattling windows. He'd been nursing a beer since they arrived at the cottage, each gulp a way to numb the knot in his gut.
"You seem quiet, mate,"
said his friend Jim Smith, ever the chatterbox.
"You didn't say a word at Domino's down at the bar."
Brady just gripped his bottle tighter, forcing a nonchalant shrug.
"Had an argument with the missus. She's gonna spend a few nights at her mom's. Gonna have to make it up to her."
The gust outside rattled the window again, as if punctuating his half-hearted excuse.
"You sure the fishing party's coming? It's blowing a gale out there. There's no way we're setting off this evening."
Brady took a long pull from his bottle, eyes flickering through the windows where rain lashed against the glass.
"Nah, but they'll come down tonight regardless. Gotta prep to launch. Check the gear. Storm should blow over by morning, and we'll be ready to set off at first light. They catch us come after weather like this."
Jim frowned, rubbing his thick neck where an old boxing injury never quite healed right.
"Listen, mate. I'd rather catch a train home, sleep in me own bed. I can be back at dawn, no worries."
"You serious?"
Brady's voice sharpened, the knuckles on his hand whitened around the bottle.
"Come on, Jim. At least wait till the boys get here. We need your muscle to haul the equipment down. Prep to launch proper."
"What's so bloody important about the—"
"I need you here, mate. Come on."
Smith gazed up at the street once more, then shrugged.
"Righto, mate. I'll wait here."
He leaned back against the railing, his massive shoulders hunched forward as he lit a cigarette. Brady paced nervously, counting seconds under his breath. Not 5 minutes passed before another car pulled up, its headlights cutting through the rain before abruptly shutting off.
"I think that's them,"
Smith said, his voice sure. Brady twisting in his chair to catch a glimpse.
"Blimey, they're bloody eager. You all right? You're as pale as a corpse."
Anxiety coiled in Brady's gut.
"Listen, Jim. We better meet him in the boat shack. Get a head start prepping that tub of yours."
Brady led the way down the slippery wooden steps, his shoes squelching through mud as they trudged towards the boathouse at the edge of the property. The ramshackle structure loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the churning sea beyond. Wind howled through the gaps in its weather planks, making the whole thing creak and groan like a dying animal. Smith followed, hunching his broad shoulders against the driving rain. The boat shack was barely more than a glorified shed, 20 feet long, half as wide, with a corrugated iron roof that rattled like a machine gun fire in the gale. Inside, the air hung thick with the stench of fish guts, motor oil, and mildew. Fishing nets hung like a ghostly curtain from the rafters, swaying in the draft. The two friends waited for the others to join them. The boat shack door creaked open, letting in a blast of wild air as the three men ducked inside. Smith's muscles tensed immediately. These blokes weren't dressed for fishing. No waterproofs, no boots, nothing practical. Just dark suits beneath their rain-slicked overcoats. The tallest one, a gaunt-faced man with a scar splitting his left eyebrow, closed the door behind him with deliberate slowness.
Well,
said the gaunt man, water dripping from his coat into the wooden planks.
Looks like our fishing party's complete, and we finally caught the big one we're after.
His eyes fixed on Smith with predatory focus. Smith glanced from the strangers to Brady, confusion twisting into suspicion.
What's this about then?
His voice dropped an octave, the boxer in him sizing up the room, calculating distances, angles of attack. The shortest of the three newcomers chuckled, a sound like gravel in a tin can.
It's about rats, Smith. Dirty, squealing rats.
He pulled off his sodden gloves, finger by finger.
Word has you been whispering in coppers' ears, telling tales that ain't yours to tell.
I ain't no bloody rat.
Smith growled, eyes darting between the three men and Brady, understanding dawning on his weathered face.
Don't play dumb,
Snarled the man with a scar.
Stan Watson's rotting in Long Bay Prison because of you. 3 years for a job only you and Brady here knew about.
He took a menacing step forward. Smith's gaze snapped to Brady. Betrayal etched across his face.
You set me up, you spineless bastard.
Brady couldn't meet his eyes.
I'm sorry, Jim. I didn't have a choice.
His voice was barely audible above the storm.
So you sold me out.
Smith's massive hands balled into fists. Jim lunged forward with the speed that had made him feared in the ring, meaty fist connecting with Brady's stomach. Brady stumbled back and went crashing into fishing tackle. The three men moved at once. The gaunt man reached inside his coat, but Smith was already on him, delivering a crushing blow to his jaw that dropped him to his knees. The shortest thug swung a blackjack that whistled past Smith's ear. Smith countered with an uppercut that sent him flying across the floorboards.
Bloody hell!
Gasped the third man, scrambling backward. Smith was unstoppable, a force of nature fueled by rage and betrayal. He grabbed the fishing gaff from the wall, swinging it in a wide arc that kept the thugs at bay. The gaunt man staggered to his feet, blood streaming from his split lip.
Enough of this.
He snarled, reaching into his coat again. This time, his hand emerged with a revolver. Smith, mid-swing with the gaff, froze for just a heartbeat. The crack of the pistol echoed like thunder inside the small boathouse. The first bullet caught Smith on the right shoulder, spinning him sideways. He roared in pain but stayed on his feet, lurching forward with desperate fury. 3 more shots rang in quick succession. Smith's massive frame shuddered, the gaff clattering to the floor as he dropped to one knee. Blood bloomed across his shirt, dark and expanding rapidly. He collapsed to the ground, gazing at his so-called friend as the life drained from him.
Jesus Christ.
The short thug muttered, his voice barely audible above the howling wind. He looked down at Smith's body, blood pooling on the warped wooden floor. The gaunt man tucked his revolver back inside his coat.
Bloody hell, Brady. He didn't say he'd put up such a fight.
Brady stared at Smith's lifeless body, his face ashen. The boxer's eyes remained fixed on him, even in death, an accusation that would haunt him till his own grave. He swallowed hard, forcing down the bile rising in his throat.
We need to move.
The third man said.
Can't stand around gawking. Plan was always to dump him at sea.
The gaunt man nodded, scanning the shack.
There.
He pointed to a large tin trunk wedged beneath a shelf.
Get that. It'll have to do.
The 2 other men hauled the tin trunk into the center of the shack, tossing out its contents. The gaunt man bent down, measuring Smith's massive frame against the trunk with his eyes.
He won't fit.
He said flatly.
Not with those boxer shoulders.
Brady paced nervously, glancing between the body and the door.
Christ, you can't just leave him here.
The short thug rummaged through a pile of tools in the corner, returning with a rusty handsaw.
Got no choice, do we?
He held the jagged blade up to the dim light.
Gonna have to make 'em more compacted-like.
Jesus.
Brady whispered, turning away.
There's an old mattress in the corner,
The third man said, dragging the stained thing across the floor.
Lay him there.
The short thug grabbed Smith's shoulders while the gaunt man took his feet. They heaved the massive body onto the filthy mattress with a wet thud. Smith's dead eyes stared at the ceiling, accusation frozen on his face.
Hold him steady.
the short thug ordered, positioning the rusty handsaw at Smith's right shoulder.
We gotta saw those arms off at the socket.
Brady turned away, retching into a bucket of bait. The sound of metal teeth biting into flesh and bone filled the shack, grinding and wet. The storm outside seemed to grow louder, as if nature itself was trying to drown out the butchery happening within. A few minutes later, the short man straightened up, wiping sweat from his brow despite the chill. Smith's limbs lay disconnected beside the torso, grotesque parodies of the powerful arms that had once knocked men cold in the ring.
Get that trunk over here.
The short man ordered. They slid Smith's body into the tin trunk, pushing and shoving until it settled with a sickening squelch. They just about managed to close the latch with the body inside.
What about these?
The third man nodded towards the severed arms. Brady, who'd been silent throughout the butchery, found his voice.
There's some rope in that corner and an old rug,
He said, pointing to a rolled-up bundle in the far corner of the shack. His hands trembled as he lit a cigarette, the match flame dancing wildly in the draft. The gaunt man dragged the rug over, unrolling it beside Smith's detached limbs.
Rope.
He demanded, and snapped his fingers impatiently. The short thug found a coil of rope hanging from a rusty nail. With practiced efficiency, they laid the severed arms side by side on the rug, binding them tightly together at the wrists. Blood seeped through the fibers as they rolled the limbs up in the rug, creating a macabre package that looked again like nothing more than an old rolled-up carpet. The gaunt man wiped the sweat from his brow with a handkerchief that was already stained with blood.
All right, let's get this mess to the boat.
They heaved the tin trunk between them, grunting with the effort. Outside, the storm continued, rain falling undeterred across the night. The wooden dock creaked and swayed beneath their feet as they staggered towards the small fishing boat that bobbed violently against its jetties.
Jesus, this bastard's heavy even in pieces.
The short thug complained as they maneuvered the trunk down into the boat, the vessel dipping a bit under the newly added weight. The third man followed with the rolled carpet, sliding it into the stern beside the trunk. Rain lashed against their faces as they struggled back towards the boat shed, their task completed with brutal efficiency. The gaunt man paused at the doorway, water streaming down his scarred face, eyes cold as a shark's.
We're off.
He announced, adjusting his soaked coat, his gaze fixed on Brady with dangerous intensity.
Dump the body once the storm is over, and don't forget to add weights to the packages so they don't float about. Last thing we need is some fisherman hauling up your mate instead of cod.
Brady glanced around the boat shed, taking in the crimson puddles of blood and the scattered tools.
What about all this mess?
He asked.
There's blood everywhere.
The gaunt man's stare was as cold as the rain.
That's your problem now, Brady.
His hand reached into his coat, fingering the revolver inside.
It's time you learn to clean up your own messes. If the coppers come sniffing around, it's your neck and the noose, not ours. I'd hate to think what might happen if you got any foolish ideas about running to them yourself.
The killer's eyes narrowed, cold and calculating.
You're on your own now. Don't try anything stupid. We won't know.
With that, he signaled to his associates with a quick jerk of his head, and they vanished into the rain. Brady stood alone in the blood-soaked boathouse, trembling. The rain hammered against the tin roof like 1,000 angry fists. He sank to his knees in the middle of the carnage, the metallic stench of blood mixing with the salty sea air. His friend, a man he'd known for 20 years, was dead and dismembered, ready to be fed to the sharks. The office was a dusty hellhole, made no better by the oppressive Sydney heat that hung in the air like a wet blanket. Detective Frank Mathews sat slumped in his creaking chair, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up to the elbows as sweat beaded on his forehead. The ceiling fan above spun lazily, doing more to circulate the stale air than provide any real relief. A single desk lamp illuminated the stack of case files that had become his unwanted companions. Outside, the harbor city buzzed with the sounds of a Tuesday afternoon in April of 1935. Automobile horns, dock workers shouting, and the occasional foghorn from the ships that dotted the harbor. Frank took a long drag from his cigarette, watching the smoke curl towards the yellowing ceiling. 20 years on force had taught him to savor these quiet moments before all hell broke loose. The telephone's shrill ring shattered his peace.
Mathews.
He barked into the receiver, flicking ash into an overflowing tray.
Frank, it's Kalman. We better get down to Coogee Aquarium. We have a new case. It's a weird one.
Frank suppressed a groan. Kalman had a talent for understating the bizarre.
Define weird, Kalman. Last time you said that, I spent weeks looking at fake bank checks.
A shark puked up a human arm. Still fresh.
Frank's cigarette hung forgotten between his lips.
Come again?
A bloody tiger shark at the aquarium. They caught it last week. Just coughed up a man's arm in front of a crowd. Woman fainting, kids screaming. It's a proper circus down here.
Christ.
Frank crushed his cigarette and reached for his hat.
Did they find anything else?
Nothing yet, just the arm with a tattoo. Some kind of boxers fighting. We're keeping the press at bay, but not for long.
Frank grabbed his jacket, ignoring the stack of files threatening to avalanche from his desk.
I'll be there in 20.
The Coogee Aquarium was a madhouse by the time Frank arrived. Police had cordoned off the entrance, but a swarm of onlookers pressed against the barriers, their faces a mix of morbid curiosity and horror. Reporters waved notebooks frantically, shouting questions at anyone in uniform. Frank pushed his way through, flashing his badge.
Bloody vultures,
he muttered, stepping into the relative quiet of the aquarium's entrance hall. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of salt water and something else. A sickly, sour odor that Frank recognized immediately as the beginnings of decomposition. He followed the sound of voices to the main exhibition area, where a massive pool, turned aquarium, dominated the space. The shark, a 14-foot tiger shark, circled lazily in its watery prison, seemingly unaware of the chaos it had caused. Frank spotted Danny Kalman standing near a small group of men, gesturing with his hands for him to join them.
There you are,
Kalman said, nodding at Frank.
Come see what we found.
On a metal table lay a severed arm with a rope tied around the wrist. The limb was remarkably intact, a left arm, severed at the shoulder. The skin had that waxy pallor of recent death, but showed none of the bloating or significant decomposition he'd expect from something that had been in the water for over a week, let alone inside a shark.
Jesus,
Frank muttered, examining the distinctive tattoo on the forearm. 2 boxers squaring off. The rope was about 2 feet long and was tied around the wrist with 2 half hitches, a common sailor's knot.
This is fresh, all right. Couldn't have been in the water more than a day or 2, I'd wager.
Frank looked at Kalman.
Who's in charge of this freak show of a pool?
That would be Bert Hobson over there.
Kalman pointed to a nervous-looking man in his 40s, hovering near the tank.
Brother of the property owner. He's the one who called it in.
The 2 detectives made their way over. Bert Hobson was a stocky man with the weathered face of someone who spent most of his life near the sea. His hands fidgeted incessantly with a worn cap.
Mr. Hobson,
Frank began, pulling out his notebook.
Detective Mathews, mind telling us exactly what happened here today?
Hobson swallowed hard.
It was feeding time, see? We do it as a show for the paying customers. Big draw, watching shark eat.
Hobson twisted his cap nervously.
We tossed in some fish parts, same as always. The beast swallowed them down, then started thrashing something fierce. Next thing, it's spewing its guts, then out comes that.
He pointed to the arm on the steel table. Frank studied the man's face, looking for any sign of deception.
Did you add the rope?
No, sir. It came out of the shark just like that.
And you're certain nobody could have thrown or planted this arm in your tank?
Absolutely not.
Hobson's indignation seemed genuine.
We keep this place locked tight at night. My men sleep here and no one could come in unnoticed. And during the day, there's always someone watching. My brother would have my hide if anything happened to that shark. It cost us a fortune to catch it and transport it.
Kalman circled the massive tank, examining its structure.
What about these intake pipes?
Kalman asked, pointing to the thick tubes running into the back of the pool.
Could someone have shoved something through there?
Hobson shook his head emphatically.
Not a chance, Detective. Every inlet and outlet has metal grates on them.
He gestured for them to follow him behind the pool where the filtration system hummed steadily.
See for yourself. 1/4-inch steel mesh. Nothing bigger than a minnow gets through these.
Frank squatted down to examine the grates, running his fingers along the metal. They were solid, showing no signs of tampering. He glanced up at Hobson.
And the shark? When exactly did you catch it?
We could go Thursday, out past the heads, near Botany Bay. Took 6 men to haul it in.
And it's been here the whole time? No chance it was moved or swapped out?
None whatsoever. That beast hasn't left our sight since we hauled it in. Too valuable.
And there's nothing else unusual you've noticed about the shark?
Frank pressed, lighting a cigarette.
Anything at all since you caught it?
Hobson hesitated, his eyes darting towards the tank.
Well, there is one thing. Might be nothing.
In my experience, Mr. Hobson, nothing rarely coughs up human remains.
Well, while we were cleaning up after the incident, we found something else mixed with the mess. Thought it was just some more fish parts at first, but one of my boys said it looked like shark bits.
Shark bits?
Kalman stepped closer, suddenly more interested.
Hey, chunks of what looks like a smaller shark. Gills, backbone, some thin parts, bit of stomach lining. All chewed up but recognizable if you know what you're looking at.
Frank and Kalman exchanged a glance.
Shark in shark.
Kalman mused.
That would explain the anomaly with the arm.
Frank turned to him.
You mean the condition of it?
Yes, the freshness. I've been examining that arm before you arrived. By all accounts, if a man's arm is consumed by a tiger shark for over a week, it should show significant decomposition. But it doesn't.
Frank took a deep drag from his cigarette, the pieces clicking into place.
So, you're saying our tiger shark ate another shark, which had previously eaten the arm?
It's perfectly plausible. Tiger sharks are notorious scavengers. They'll eat practically anything. Turtles, smaller sharks, license plates. They're the tin men of the ocean.
Frank paced around the tank, watching the massive predator glide through the water with eerie grace.
So our victim loses his arm somehow. Accident, foul play, who knows? Smaller shark comes along, thinks it's found lunch. Then our friend here decides the smaller shark looks appetizing and swallows it whole.
And because the arm was protected inside the smaller shark's stomach, the decomposition process would have been significantly slowed down.
Kalman finished following Frank's train of thought, showing off his skills that had already gotten the bright young detective a reputation in the department.
Well, I'll be damned.
Frank muttered, flicking his cigarette butt into a nearby trash can.
A shark inside a shark. Well, Cal, you've earned your way into this case. Get all this mess over to Dr. Palmer at headquarters. See if you can corroborate your theory with a proper autopsy. Then, see if Constable Lindsay can get any prints from it. Get back to me as soon as you've gotten the results.
Detective Mathews stayed to get more details on where the shark was found and to double-check that no one could have thrown the arm in the tank. Satisfied with his inquiries, he went back to the precinct. A couple of days later, as Detective Frank Mathews was going over the sensational news reports that had come out, his office door swung open with a creak that would have made a funeral home seem cheerful. Kalman strode in, clutching a manila folder thick with papers. His usual immaculate appearance showing signs of strain, tie slightly askew, a shadow of stubble on his jawline.
You look like hell,
Frank observed, pushing aside the half-empty cup of cold coffee that had been his breakfast.
Tell me you've got something.
Kalman dropped into the chair across from Frank's desk with a weary sigh.
Oh, I've got something all right. Just not sure you're gonna like it.
Frank leaned back, the ancient office chair protesting with a squeal.
Try me.
Dr. Palmer, with the help of a shark expert, Dr. Koppelson, have finished their examination. The shark in sharp theory holds water, so to speak.
Kalman said, opening the folder to reveal several gruesome photographs of the severed arm, now laid out on an examination table.
But that's not the interesting part. The arm wasn't bitten off by any shark. It was severed with something sharp just below the shoulder.
Frank ran a hand through his graying hair and stared at the photographs.
So it seems like we'd got ourselves a proper murder case. Some poor bastard gets himself killed, chopped up, and dumped into the harbor.
Looks that way.
Kalman said, his voice grim.
Palmer says the cut was clean. Whoever did this knew what they were doing.
Or they at practice.
Frank muttered, the thought sending a chill down Kalman's spine despite the oppressive heat.
Any identification of our victim yet?
Kalman shook his head.
Nothing. But Constable Lindsay managed to lift 2 usable fingerprints from the arm.
He pulled out another sheet from his folder. 2 magnified fingerprint impressions. Their intricate whorls and ridges highlighted in stark contrast.
He says they're good quality, but it'll take weeks to find a match in the files, if there is even a match to be found.
Kalman continued, spreading more photographs across Frank's desk.
This isn't exactly our standard fare. No ID, no crime scene, no motive, not even a whole bloody corpse. Hard to build a murder case on that.
Frank studied the close-up of the tattoo, the 2 boxers locked in eternal combat.
Agreed.
He drummed his fingers on the desk and then pushed one of the newspapers with the headline, "Arm Found in Shark Tank," towards Kalman.
What we need is a shortcut.
That's what I was thinking.
Kalman replied, a hint of enthusiasm returning to his voice.
The tattoo's distinctive enough. Someone has to recognize it.
They both paused, considering the implications. Leaking details to the press was always a gamble. It could bring vital information or send the investigation spiraling into a circus of false leads and tabloid sensationalism. But with no body, no crime scene, and only a severed arm to work with, they needed a breakthrough.
All right.
Frank decided, reaching for his cigarettes.
Let's feed the vultures. Get a good photograph of that tattoo to them, leak it to the Herald, and also to the Truth for a good measure.
Kalman nodded and got up from the desk to get the job done.
And Kalman, keep the severed arm part quiet. If we get someone coming forward, I want to test them. Only the killer would know it wasn't just torn off by the shark.
With that, the picture was leaked and the news reports came out the next day. On Monday, April 29th, only 4 days after the arm was found, Detectives Frank Mathews and Danny Kalman were meeting again to go over the case. It was mid-afternoon, the sun slanting through the Venetian blinds into Frank's office, casting striped shadows across the scattered case files. The air hung heavy with cigarette smoke and frustration. Frank leaned against his desk, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, while Kalman paced the small space between the filing cabinets.
Russell did a good job with that shark,
Kalman said, referring to the notes in his hand.
Cut the damn thing open stem to stern. Empty its guts onto the table. Nothing but half-digested fish and those bits of smaller shark we already knew about.
Waste of good fish oil if you asked me,
Frank muttered, staring at the crime scene photographs scattered on his desk.
But at least it further confirms our theory. The arm was indeed inside a smaller shark.
Kalman nodded, tracing the timeline they had sketched on a chalkboard.
Which puts time of death somewhere between 2 or 3 weeks ago, according to Palmer's estimates.
And gives us sweet bother all to work with,
Frank added, reaching for his cigarettes.
Still no witnesses, no crime scene, no...
A sharp knock interrupted him. Constable Jenkins poked his head through the doorway, his young face flushed with excitement.
"Detectives,"
he said, slightly out of breath.
"There's a gentleman at the front desk. Says he recognizes the tattoo from the papers."
Frank and Kalman exchanged a quick glance. This could be the break they'd been waiting for, or just another dead end.
Send him in, Jenkins,
Frank ordered, straightening his tie and stubbing out his cigarette. Frank cleared a space on his desk, hid the scattered crime scene photos, and left only a single notepad and pen in plain view. He wanted to make this interview as casual as possible. The less pressure, the more likely their visitor would talk freely. The man who entered the office was in his early 40s, with a weathered complexion of someone who spent considerable time outdoors. His suit was clean but inexpensive, hanging loosely on his frame. His calloused laborer's hands clutched a worn felt hat. His eyes darted nervously around the room, taking in the 2 detectives with obvious apprehension.
Thank you for coming in, Mr.
Frank gestured to the empty chair.
Smith. Edward Smith.
The man replied, lowering himself into the seat. His voice carried a slight tremor.
I saw the picture in the paper yesterday. That arm they found. The tattoo.
Edward continued, twisting his hat in his hand.
2 boxers. It's my brother's. Jim Smith. I'd know it anywhere. He got it after his first professional fight back in 1915.
Frank felt a jolt of recognition at the name, but kept his face carefully neutral. Years on the force had taught him the value of an impassive expression. Inside, his mind was racing, connecting dots from an old case file that had been gathering dust for years. Kalman, who had been leaning against the filing cabinet, straightened up.
You're certain about this, Mr. Smith?
Absolutely certain. Jim was a boxer before he got into other lines of work. Those 2 fighters on his arm, he designed it himself, said it represented the fight inside him.
He swallowed hard.
Is my brother dead?
Frank exchanged a look with Kalman.
It's likely, Mr. Smith. We don't know for certain yet. All we have is the arm.
Christ. How does something like this happen?
That's what we're trying to figure out,
Frank said, leaning forward.
Give me 1 second before we continue.
Frank grabbed a piece of paper to write a note in it. It read, "Check the shark arm fingerprints to see if they match Jim Smith on our files," and gave it to Detective Kalman.
Bring this to Constable Lindsay and come back.
Kalman took the note and headed off.
Sorry about that. So, where were we?
Frank pulled his chair closer and clasped his hands on the desk. His blue eyes fixed on Edward Smith's face. The room seemed to shrink around them, the sounds of the precinct fading into the background. This was the delicate dance of interrogation, knowing when to push, when to pull back, when to let the silence do the work.
Mr. Smith, when was the last time anyone saw your brother?
Frank asked, his voice gentle but firm. Edward shifted in his seat, lines of worry etching deeper into his weathered face.
My brother's mother-in-law saw him last, morning of April 8th. He told her he was heading out on a fishing job. We haven't seen him since.
Frank made a note on his pad. April 8th, 3 weeks ago. Plenty of time for a body to disappear in Sydney Harbor.
I need you to tell me everything you know, Mr. Smith. Every detail could be important.
Edward rubbed his palms on his knees, gathering his thoughts.
Well, you see, Jim's mother-in-law, my brother and his family live with her. She told us that on the morning of April 8th, she saw Jim talking to a small boy outside our house.
A boy?
Frank's eyebrows raised slightly.
What boy?
Well, that's the strange part. We know most folks in the neighborhood, but she'd never seen this kid before. Light-haired lad, she said, maybe 10 or 11.
Frank jotted this down in his notebook, the pencil scratching loudly in the quiet office as Detective Kalman quietly slipped back into the room.
After speaking with this mystery boy, what happened?
Jim went back inside. His mother-in-law said he seemed normal, started packing right away.
I see. And did Jim say anything to her before he left?
Jim told her he was going to Cronulla on a fishing expedition and would be away for a week maybe.
Frank exchanged a meaningful glance with Kalman, who had positioned himself near the door, arms crossed, listening intently.
Did your brother often go on these trips? Was Cronulla a usual spot for him?
Edward shifted uncomfortably.
Not really, no. Jim wasn't much of a fisherman, if I'm being honest.
Frank leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking beneath his weight. His eyes narrowed as he studied Edward Smith's face. Something wasn't adding up.
Let me get this straight,
Frank said, his voice taking on an edge.
Your brother's been missing for nearly 3 weeks, and you're only coming forward now because you saw his tattoo in the papers?
Edward's eyes dropped to his hands, which were twisting his hat into a misshapen lump.
I know how it looks, Detective.
Do you? Because it looks like you didn't give a damn that your brother vanished off the face of the earth. Why didn't you file a missing persons report when he didn't come back from this supposed fishing trip?
A flush crept up Edward's neck.
Jim has had a complicated past. We didn't want to get him into trouble.
Frank tapped his pencil against his notepad, his eyes narrowing.
Complicated past? That's putting it mildly, isn't it, Mr. Smith? Your brother's name has crossed my desk before.
Edward swallowed hard, color draining from his face.
Look, Jim's had his troubles, sure, but he was turning things around.
So instead of filing a report, you just what? Hoped he'd wander back home eventually?
It wasn't just that.
Edward said defensively, straightening in his chair.
There was a phone call.
Frank and Calman exchanged glances.
What phone call?
Calman asked, stepping closer. Edward licked his dry lips.
On Friday, April 12th, I think, Gladys, that's Jim's wife, she got word from Mrs. Peterson's down the street. She's got one of the only phones in our neighborhood and takes messages for us. She came over and told Gladys that a man had called for her. Said Jim was fine and would be coming home the following Monday.
Frank leaned forward. His interest piqued.
But he never did he?
Edward shook his head, a pained expression crossing his face.
No. That's where we really started to worry. But we still thought, well, you know Jim's reputation. We figured maybe he'd gotten himself into something and needed to lay low.
This phone call,
Calman interjected.
Did Mrs. Peterson describe the caller? Voice, accent, anything?
Just that it was a man. Needed to call our house to reach Gladys, so we figured it was someone friendly with Jim.
Edward's hands had finally stopped fidgeting with his hat. Frank leaned forward in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight.
Do you know who he was going with on this fishing expedition?
Edward shifted in his seat, his expression troubled.
Well, Jim told his wife that he was going to skipper a fishing expedition for Gregory Vaughn. So that's what we thought. But when he didn't return, even after the call, Gladys went to Vaughn's office to ask about Jim. He wasn't there, so she used the phone in his office to speak with him.
Frank's eyebrows shot up.
Gregory Vaughn? The real estate developer?
Edward nodded grimly.
The very same.
Tell us about this call,
Frank pressed, reaching for his cigarettes.
Gladys told me the conversation word for word. She was so upset after it.
How so?
She asked Vaughn if anything was wrong with Jim, and Vaughn seemed confused, said, "What do you mean?" Then Gladys told him she understood Jim was taking him and a party fishing at Cronulla.
And Vaughn denied it?
Flat out said no, not me. Gladys thought he was joking at first, said as much to him. But Vaughn was serious. Told her Jim had left a note in his office saying he was heading out to Cronulla, but that's all that he knew about it.
Frank's eyes met Calman's over the smoke of a cigarette. This case was getting more twisted by the minute. A missing man, a phantom fishing trip, a mysterious caller, and now Gregory Vaughn, one of Sydney's wealthy, influential, and crooked businessmen, somehow caught in the web. Frank exhaled a plume of cigarette smoke, his mind racing through the implications.
And that was the last thing anyone heard from Vaughn about the matter?
Far as I know,
Edward confirmed, shifting uncomfortably in his chair.
Gladys was beside herself after that. Started thinking Jim had gotten into trouble or something. I guess she was right.
Calman cleared his throat.
Did your brother have any enemies, Mr. Smith? Anyone who might want to harm him?
Detective, my brother was a former boxer of babbled in bookmaking and hangs around, a tough crowd. He had a list of enemies longer than my arm.
He winced at his own unfortunate choice of words.
But enough to do that? I can't imagine it.
Frank crushed his cigarette in the ashtray and leaned back in his chair, studying Edward Smith's face. The man looked genuinely distressed, the lines around his eyes deepening with worry as he began twisting his hat in his hand again.
Is there anything else you can think of, Mr. Smith? Anything at all that might help us understand what happened to your brother?
No, Detective. I've told you everything I know. Jim wasn't perfect, but he was family. And whatever he got himself into, he didn't deserve this.
All right, Mr. Smith. We appreciate you coming forward. Constable Jenkins will escort you to the front office, where you'll need to sign more papers and this deposition. One last thing before you go, Mr. Smith.
Frank said, standing up and extending his hand.
We'd appreciate it if you kept this conversation between us. Don't speak to the press about your brother or the circumstances of our discovery. It could compromise our investigation.
Edward nodded solemnly, shaking Frank's hand with a firm grip.
I understand, Detective. My family just wants answers and justice if someone did this to him.
We'll do everything we can,
Frank assured him, his weathered face betraying nothing of the storm of theories already brewing in his mind.
If anything else comes to mind, anything at all, no matter how insignificant it might seem, call us immediately.
As Constable Jenkins led Edward Smith away, Frank turned to Kalman, who was already looking expectantly at him. Before either could speak, the door swung open again, and Constable Lindsay walked in with a smile on his face. Lindsay handed over a report that had a set of fingerprint cards attached to it by a metal clip. Frank took it, eye-scanning the pages rapidly as Kalman peered over his shoulder.
Well, I'll be damned,
Frank muttered, a grim smile spreading across his weathered face.
We've got our victim.
The fingerprint card was yellowed at the edges, part of a file that had gathered dust in the record room for years. Next to the inked impressions was a mugshot of a broad-shouldered man, with a square jaw and hard eyes that stared defiantly at the camera. The name Jim Smith was printed beneath, along with a list of priors: assault, illegal gambling, suspected racketeering. And there, near the bottom at the distinguishing marks section, tattoo, left forearm, 2 boxers in fighting stance.
It's him all right.
We've got a solid match, Detective. Ran those prints twice to be sure. Perfect 9-point match on both prints. No question about it. That arm belongs to Jim Smith.
Good work, Lindsay. That'll be all for now.
Yes, sir.
Lindsay nodded, clearly pleased with himself. Once the door closed behind the constable, Frank moved to the far wall of his office where a row of filing cabinets stood like sentinels. With a metallic screech, he pulled open the drawer and began rifling through the files.
You know something about Smith, don't you?
Kalman surmised.
Yes, but not only Smith.
Frank replied, pulling out a couple of files.
Here's the file on Jim. Let's see. He would be 45 years old by now. Born in England. Married to Gladys Malloy and has a son named Raymond Smith. His son should be about around 18 years old at this point. Jim Smith was a former boxer, then bouncer, and then billiard marker at Tatterhall, a respectable men's club. In 1928, Jim Smith went bankrupt in a shady real estate development he was fronting for Reginald Holmes.
Reginald Holmes? That name sounds familiar.
That's the thing. Holmes is a sneaky weasel from North England, Sunderland, I think. He inherited a yacht building company from his family. The boatyard is situated in McMahon's Point on Sydney's North Shore.
Oh yeah, I've heard about those boats. Fast ones from what I gathered.
Fast, and not just for racing. Rumor has it they're used for smuggling drugs. I can't prove it, but I've been tracking this gang for a while. So, as I was saying in 1928, Jim Smith was involved in a real estate scam orchestrated by Holmes. Jim got a fat payout and opened a seedy billiard club with it. We arrested him in September of 1932 for facilitating illegal gambling there. He got convicted, his saloon license was revoked, and he served a few months. We couldn't prove the scam, but I know it happened.
The room grew heavy with tension as Frank leaned in.
Now, there's more to it. In 1933, a luxury yacht, the Pathfinder, was acquired by a certain Gregory Vaughan. Sound familiar?
Kalman's eyes flickered with recognition.
Yeah, the guy who was supposed to go fishing with our armless thug?
Exactly. Vaughan is a real estate agent with a squeaky clean record, yet he's in cahoots with Holmes. He's tied into both the real estate scam and this shady yacht business. He was registered as the owner of the Pathfinder, but he didn't pay a dime. Holmes did. And here's the kicker. Holmes didn't have the funds himself, so he borrowed £3,200 from another not-so-outstanding citizen, Albert Stannard.
£3,200? That's more than most see in a lifetime.
Yeah, you could buy a big house with that. So, Stannard gives Holmes $3,200. The boats is purchased in Vaughan's name, and then it is insured for $8,500, more than double its value, setting it up for a nifty payout if something happened to it. So, sometime last year, I get a call from the Terrigal police north of Sydney. Guess which strong-armed thug was seen rowing away from the Pathfinder as it sunk into the ocean?
Don't tell me. Jim Smith?
You don't let anything get past you, do you? He was not only seen as the boat went down, he refused to get help from the collier who spotted him.
So what happened?
I didn't pursue Jim. He was just a henchman hired to take care of the Pathfinder. Instead, I grilled Holmes, Stannard, and Vaughan about it. I am convinced they were using the yacht for drug smuggling, and when the heat turned up, they sank it to claim the insurance. I tipped off the insurer, and they got nothing for it. Big old boat and big old load of cash just gone. Like that.
Looks like we should look into this crew. Reginald Holmes, the crafty boat builder, Albert Stannard, the shadowy businessman, and Gregory Vaughan, the smooth-talking real estate agent.
That's our only lead right now. We need to bring these men in for questioning, but we must tread carefully. They're not your run-of-the-mill crooks. I'll head down to Cronulla tomorrow to trace Jim Smith's last known movements. Cal, you dig deeper on Holmes, Stannard, and Vaughan. Find every scrap you can on their whereabouts these past few weeks.
Clear.
With that, the detectives parted ways, stepping out into a Sydney night that promised more shadow than light, and pondering this case that was pulling them deeper into the murky depths of Sydney's underside. Detective Frank Mathews set out to trace Jim Smith's last known location the next day, leaving behind the confinement of the city for Cronulla's windswept shores. The late morning light was weak and grey, filtering through low-hanging clouds as he drove along narrow country roads that eventually opened up into a rugged coastal landscape. Frank parked his car in the main street of the seaside resort town and pulled out a small notebook with a list of establishments he'd compiled. At the top was Hotel Cecil, circled twice in blue ink. Local coppers had mentioned it as a watering hole where information flowed as freely as the beer. If Smith had been anywhere near Cronulla, someone at the Cecil would have seen him. The hotel stood like a sentinel overlooking the beach, the rectangular two-story facade bleached by salt and sun. Yet the white paint and white tiles covering the bottom front wall shimmered despite the grey day. At the top of the building, in the faux triangular roof, the letters Hotel Cecil were clearly visible. The hotel's lounge interior was dim and cool, a welcome respite from the glare outside. The bar ran along one wall, polished to a high shine by countless elbows and spilled drinks. A few locals nursed their midday beers, conversation dying as Frank entered. He felt their eyes on him as he made his way to the bar. The barman was a wiry man with thinning hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. His hands moved with practiced efficiency as he wiped down the counter.
"What will it be?"
he asked, not looking up from his work. Frank placed his badge on the counter.
Information, if you're selling.
The barman glanced at the badge, then at Frank's face.
"Detective
Mathews, Frank Mathews, Sydney Criminal Investigation Branch."
He slid a photograph across the bar, showing Jim Smith's face from his police file.
Seen this man recently? Name's Jim Smith.
The barman studied the photo. He glanced around the room before leaning closer.
"Yeah, I've seen him. Was him here about 3 weeks back."
You sure?
"Hard to forget. Big bloke, tattoo of 2 boxers on his arm. Came in with another fella, small skinny type, nervous hands. Called himself Williams."
Williams?
Frank repeated, committing the name to memory.
Did you get a first name?
"Nah, just Williams."
The barman's eyes drifted toward the far corner of the room.
"Those 2 gents over there,"
he said quietly, nodding toward a table where 2 men hunched over a game of dominoes.
"Halbert and Gordon. They were here that day. Got pretty friendly with your man Smith and his friend. Spent a good day of the afternoon playing dominoes and drinking together."
Frank glanced over at the pair.
Thanks.
Frank said, sliding a coin across the bar.
Keep this between us, yeah?
The barman pocketed the coin with a nod, already turning his attention to another customer. Frank made his way across the room, weaving between tables. The two men barely looked up as he approached, focused intently on their game. The ivory dominoes clicking against the worn wooden table as one of the men made his move.
Gentlemen,
Frank said, pulling up a chair without waiting for an invitation.
Detective Frank Mathews, Sydney CIB. Mind if I join you?
The older of the two men, silver-haired, with a face that resembled cracked leather, looked up with rheumy eyes.
Free country, innit?
For now.
Frank replied with a thin smile, settling into the chair. He pulled out a cigarette case, offering it around. The younger man accepted with a nod of thanks.
I'm looking for information about a man who was here a few weeks back.
Frank said, lighting his cigarette.
Jim Smith, big fella, boxer, tattoo on his arm.
The two men looked at each other, as if deciding whether to speak or not.
Yes, I know him.
The older man said, squinting at Frank through the haze of cigarette smoke.
Albert Ward.
He introduced himself, extending a weathered hand.
Insurance agent by trade, domino player by passion.
Frank shook the offered hand, noting the firm grip despite the man's age.
You played with Smith?
I've played with him all right.
Albert confirmed.
Known James Smith casually for about 15 years now. We run in the same circles, you might say.
The younger man cleared his throat.
Gordon Dahl,
He offered.
clerk at the shipping office down by the wharf.
Frank nodded in acknowledgement, his attention still fixed on Albert.
When exactly did you last see Smith?
Albert's brow furrowed in concentration.
Beginning of the month, it was a really quiet day. A Monday, I'd say. We were sitting right here, playing dominoes, just like now. Smith and this Williams fella came in around 4. I saw Jim and asked him to join our game.
Detective Mathews noted that this aligned with the day Jim Smith was last seen.
What was your impression of this Williams character?
Frank asked, studying Albert's face for any hint of deception. Albert's weathered fingers rearranged his dominoes absently.
Quiet sort, nervous like, kept looking over his shoulder, but him and Smith seemed friendly enough, laughing, sharing drinks, no tension I could see.
They'd known each other long?
Seemed like it. Couldn't say for certain. Smith introduced him as my mate Williams. Didn't get a first name.
Albert's rheumy eyes narrowed in recollection.
Though come to think of it, Smith called him Paddy once or twice.
Frank made a note in his pad, mind racing. Paddy Williams. Might be a lead worth following.
What else can you tell me? What did they talk about?
Albert tilted his head, considering the question.
Usual stuff. Weather, fishing, the races. Then Smith mentioned he was heading back to Sydney that night. Said he had some business to attend to the next morning.
Frank's pen stilled mid-stroke.
He specifically said he was returning to Sydney that night? You're certain?
Clear as day.
Albert confirmed, nodding empathically.
Williams tried to convince him to stay the night, but Smith was firm about it. Said he wanted to catch a train and spend the night with his missus.
Frank's interest piqued. This contradicted what Edward Smith had told him about his brother's planned week-long fishing trip.
And Williams, how did he take that?
Albert and Gordon exchanged glances.
Not well,
Gordon admitted.
Got all fidgety, kept saying Smith should reconsider, even offered him to stay at his cottage for the night.
His cottage?
Frank leaned forward.
Yeah.
Albert nodded.
Called it Cord Joy, or something like that. Funny name for a place.
Cord Joy.
Frank repeated, making another note.
Any idea where this cottage is located?
Gordon nodded, leaning in.
I know it. It's not far from here. Right next to Gunnamatta Park. Blue weatherboard with a tin roof.
Frank's eyebrows rose slightly. He hadn't expected such a detailed answer.
You've seen it?
Pass by it fishing,
Gordon confirmed.
Distinctive little place. Sits back from the shoreline a bit, nestled in the tea trees.
Frank scribbled a location in his notebook, then returned to the main thread.
So Smith refused to stay at this cottage. What happened next?
Albert took a long drag from his cigarette, his eyes distant with recollection.
Not much. We played a few games and then they left together.
Thanks, gentlemen. You've been more helpful than you know.
Frank stubbed out his cigarette and rose from the table.
If I have any more questions...
We'll be right here,
Albert said with a wry smile. Frank left the Cecil, squinting against the midday light. He pulled out the rudimentary map he'd been given of Cronulla at the station, quickly locating Gunnamatta Park with his finger. It wasn't far, a 15-minute walk tops. He moved with purpose, his mind churning over the inconsistencies. Smith telling his family he'd be gone a week on a fishing trip, yet telling Albert he was heading back to Sydney that same night. The mysterious Paddy Williams, who seemed desperate to keep Smith in Cronulla, none of it added up. A few minutes later, the park came into view, a stretch of wild coastal vegetation with the ocean glinting beyond. Frank checked his map again, tracing the line of the shoreline with his finger. If Gordon's directions were accurate, the cottage would be just ahead, tucked in the scrubby tea trees. Frank spotted it through a break in the foliage, a small blue weatherboard structure with a rusting tin roof. Cord Joy. As he approached, something caught his eye. Movement through one of the cottage's windows. Frank slowed his pace, instinctively moving to the cover of the trees. The front door stood partially open, swinging slightly in the sea breeze. Drawing closer, he could hear shuffling from inside, the sound of papers being riffled through, drawers opening and closing. Someone was searching the place. Frank's hand reached instinctively for his holster as he approached the cottage cautiously, heart pounding in his ears. This could be Williams, the last person known to have seen Jim Smith alive. Years of police work had taught him to approach unknown situations with caution, especially when they involved a potential murder case. He took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. The shuffling sound grew louder. Whoever was inside wasn't making an effort to be quiet. Frank crept up the weather-beaten steps, wincing as one creaked beneath his weight. The movement inside paused momentarily, then resumed. In one fluid motion, Frank drew his service revolver, pushed the door fully open with his shoulder, and stepped into the dim interior. This brings us to the end of part 1 of 2 of the Shark Arm murder. Stay tuned to hear how this true crime episode ends. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share. All this is possible only thanks to your support. Thanks for listening. I'm here for you after all.